When our next guest was 4 years old, she survived genocide in Kurdistan under Saddam Hussein before fleeing with her family to the UK. Now, Kurdish Brit Taban Shoresh is using her experiences to help other survivors of conflicts overseas, including Yazidi women attacked by ISIS in Iraq. She runs a charity called Lotus Flower, which has launched its latest campaign called Refuge in the Ring, teaching women how to box to help their physical and mental health. And Taban is here with me now. Thank you very much indeed for being with us, Taban. So let's start a little bit with your story. You were 4 years old.
Yes.
And soldiers came knocking at your door. Tell us what happened.
I basically was standing in front of my uncle. As a child, when they knocked on the door, I was startled, and so I ran to him for safety. And when he opened the door, there stood two Iraqi soldiers who asked for my mother. And at that time, the way they would take the families to try and capture the men who were part of the cause was to capture the families. And so they took...
So they wanted your father, who was a poet but was also heavily involved in politics.
Yes. So they captured myself when I was 4 and my mother and my dad's parents.
And what happened? They took you away in a lorry?
They took us away in a lorry. They took us to a first prison where they interrogated the adults, and they didn't give any information away. And so after that, they took us to an ethnic prison where it was only Kurdish people, and you had women and children in one prison and the men separated in another. And after about 2 weeks, our family names were called out and we were meant to be buried alive. We had a miraculous escape because at that time you had Kurds working for Saddam Hussein, but they were actually working for Kurds undercover. And when our drivers switched, they were the ones that were to rescue us. And so after that, we spent 3 months in hiding. And my mum decided we needed to get out because our names were on the death sentence. And so we made our way, and it took 12 months before we were smuggled into Iran.
So you were travelling around Iraq. You were on the run, effectively, for a year.
Yeah, during the Iran and Iraq war. So in all the rural areas we were going, you had bombs, and the war was on two sides. So we were trying to escape death from two sides. And when we reached Iran, my father was poisoned by Saddam Hussein. And so when he was smuggled in, Amnesty International picked up on the story and flew him to the UK for safety.
And you came to the UK, you were 6 years old, is that right? When
yes.
you came to the UK, and life then became very, very different for you. It must seem surreal now to look back on what you went through at that time at such a young age. How much do you actually remember of it?
I do remember bits. I remember memories, but not emotions. It's very difficult to describe because I was so young. It's very hard to put the emotions with those images. It's only when I went back in August 2014 when I was witnessing another genocide in that region with the ISIS conflict, that at times I'd stand there and I'd see things and remember the emotions with it this time because I'm experiencing it as an adult. So yeah, I do remember images, but not the emotions.
And you have set up a charity, the Lotus Flower, to try and help women now who have been persecuted by ISIS, the Yazidi women. What is it that you're trying to do? How are you helping them?
Well, when I went back in August 2014, my first day and first experience was flying over the helicopter, rescuing Yazidi families and delivering aid. And so from day one, I had a lot of experience in terms of the trauma that they'd been through. So when I set up the Lotus Flower, I had one mission, which was to help women and girls impacted by conflict and displacement. And not only does it stem from my own personal experience, but from the 15 months of being there. And so I'm hoping that these centres gives them the tools that they need to be able to stand up on their own 2 feet.
So some of these tools, you're giving them the skills to have a livelihood, to be financially independent, but also defence. You're teaching them boxing.
We are. Right? We've just implemented a project called the Boxing Sisters, and we've got Kathy Brown, who's the UK's former champion, who is going to lead us and help us train these women. And that will be an income-generating project for the trainers, and we're picking trainers from within the camp. So our women's centres are actually placed inside the camps. And so if we choose women to train within the camps, then they are going to be the trainers that train the other girls. So that's one of the projects, yeah.
This year's Nobel Peace Prize awarded jointly to Nadia Murad, who was a sex slave captured by ISIS. And she describes telling her story as the best weapon that she has against terrorism. How much for you is it important to get these women who have been enslaved, who have watched their husbands, brothers, sons killed, who have been raped and beaten? How much are you doing in terms of trying to talk about it, in terms of the mental health as well?
So the trauma they faced is unbelievable, and what Nadia is doing is amazing in terms of telling her story and raising awareness and being a voice. The women are also wanting to share stories and, you know, to share those stories, but it's also, when you're stuck within the camp, it's very different. They've got restrictions on them, you know, they need an excuse to actually come out of their tents or cabins, and that's why the women's centres work. And if you think of that setting, there's nothing for them to do. There's no daily exercise, there's no activities, there's no social spaces. So that refuge within that centre is critical, and providing projects that enables them to help them with their mental health is really important. And this is one of the big reasons why we've chosen boxing.
Yeah, also to give them the strength to feel that they can fight back if they need to. But as we all know, exercise are very good for mental health as well. And well, fantastic work that you're doing. Taban, thanks very much indeed for being with us here on Sky News.